Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know all of us have heard from many of our constituents the last couple days with the form letters and the like. I want to thank all of those constituents who have written to us, because it is important for us to talk and communicate with our constituents, even when we don't agree with the basic premise. Based upon the letters I've received, I'm not so sure that most of the individuals that have contacted me are aware that the Senate bill that is before us is substantially different than when it left the Senate in a number of respects. Some, in my opinion, good, some, in my opinion, not as good. For instance, we all know that law enforcement has been eliminated, and so have correction officers. I believe those are good provisions in that our law enforcement have certain limits that the rest of us don't have on Social Security earnings and therefore need a retirement. Our correction officers have early retirement requirements which prohibit them from being able to choose a correction as a career forever. With respect to the robocalls that we received, I did have a number of communications with clients or with constituents. And based upon that, I will share with the Chamber their conversations. Heard from a couple retirees. The answer for retirees is simple. This law, Senate Bill 1 as originally acted, and Senate Bill 1 as before us, does nothing, it changes nothing. It can't. This gentleman said to me, my daughter's a teacher. She currently works for XYZ school district. Senate Bill 1 as amended does nothing to those contributions, to those benefits, except option 4 actuarial neutral requirements. For those of us in the chamber, we understand what that means. For those who don't, it's simply an option that Pennsylvanians have, Pennsylvania retirees in CSRS and PSRS, that no one else in the country has. We have the ability to take out our cash portion of contributions with interest, and there is supposed to be an actuarial reduction. That hasn't been neutral in the past, and the savings on that alone are billions. There's not a single person I've heard from that objects to that feature. There is also the increase in the averaging issues. Again, something that I don't believe has been objected to by any group, including bargaining units. The third issue that came up during these conversations is really the crux of today's debate. That's about, well, will school districts and will the state be able to attract qualified employees? Is this a benefit that is similar to what is in the marketplace? As an attorney for a long time and a managing partner, I can tell you this is still a benefit that is equal, if not better, to what is available to private individuals. In fact, it's better than what our federal employees receive as a benefit. Let me say that one more time. It's better than what federal employees receive. The fourth issue that came up frequently in these conversations is, why did this happen? And the assumption was that it was because the employer, whether it be the state or the school district, did not put in its minimum contribution for a period of years. And the truthful answer to that is 45% correct. It's 45% correct because that's the percentage of the unfunded liability that is attributable to not paying in contributions. And why didn't we do that? We being the collective body, many of us weren't here when those decisions were made, because the law we had in Pennsylvania was flawed. It said that you couldn't put in any more money than what the actuaries told us our next level of liability was. But the problem was we weren't measuring liability correctly. There's a book I would recommend everyone read. The U.S. Pension Crisis by Ronald J. Ryan. It talks about both public and private pension issues. It's an excellent read, and one of the previous speakers hit on some of the financial accounting issues that are still existing in this book. This gentleman says, the pension crisis is the largest financial dilemma this country faced since the Great Depression. The pension deficits of private and public plans are estimated to exceed $4 trillion at the end of 2012. If TARP 1 was a national emergency at $800 billion, what do you call this? More importantly, we must acknowledge the true cause of this pension crisis: inappropriate accounting rules that misprice pension assets and liabilities, causing exaggerated fund ratios which led to inappropriate asset allocation, benefit, and contribution decisions. It all links. The rest of this problem is as follows. Benefit enhancements, $8.6 billion, about 25% of the unfunded liability, and then the economy, $10.2 billion, or 29%. Now, we, of course, in this chamber all know that because we've been studying this issue till we're blue in the face. And now we're faced with a decision about what we do about this. Let me tell you what I think the key factor is. It's looking at the number of active employees versus the number of retirees and watching those trends. So those of you at home that think your pensions are safe, take a dose of this. In the state retirement system, there are more retirees currently than active employees. The fund bleeds $1.52 billion per year. What that means is we're paying out $1.5 billion more than we're taking in. Well, you can imagine if you had a bank account, what that would look like. In the next 5 years, the trend is about 7,200 employees in the state system are expected to retire, which is about a 5.8% increase. Not really that bad. If you turn to the PEACER system, if I were a PEACER's employee, active employee, I would be scared about whether my pension is safe. That fund loses $2.252 billion each year. 2.25. Worse yet, in the next 5 years, it's projected that 40,391 new retirees, or an additional 18.9%, will retire, causing the outflow of money to accelerate. What we have to do is shore up the fund. And one of the points that Mr. Ryan makes in his book is very clear, and that is simply this, that public sector pensions and private sector pensions have to shore up the liability aspect of the equation. It has to be ascertainable. It has to be at a low or moderate rate so that these obligations can be paid. And that's what Senate Bill 1 does. It sets forth a reliable, calculable, ascertainable number at which the employer can make contributions and the employee can plan, remembering that we haven't done anything to impact existing employees. But let me add one cautionary note. As previous speakers have indicated, that alone, along with the previous reforms that have been made, will not be enough. We still need to deal with some of the liability issues in these funds, the administrative costs, and the accounting rules. Members, I know it's never easy to face constituents when we're changing the landscape, but given the fact that we are only changing the landscape as to new employees who can decide to take the job or not take the job based upon other market conditions, this is not a bad next step. I would encourage you to support Senate Bill 1 as amended. Thank you.